Good morning, Monday morning with Matt. Slightly different today. I'm not actually going to be drawing this morning as I usually would because it's a different kind of morning. It is primary eve, the day before the primary. And I had been planning on coming here this morning to talk about hope and civic hope and how our beautiful act of civic participation each election day demonstrates the steady, unbroken faith that we all hold in America, that each voice matters, that we all get a say in how we govern ourselves, and that the people are the power that drives our nation. So I think we all know that that's what we want and what we believe in, or it's at least what we all say that we want. But we also have to acknowledge that many voices are not afforded that same space. Many votes, in fact, are discounted, gerrymandered away, suppressed through polling station closures and ID schemes and other disenfranchisements that arrive with a false label of reform or security. So, something like when the nation is waking up to despotism in plain sight that's saying mail-in ballots are massive fraud, that kind of thing. So I'm talking about bullies, political bullies that fear and threaten our democratic ideals. I'm talking about that the day before our primary election. But the value of our elections as a mutual voice is still true. I believe that, and I believe in that, and I still believe in us, that collective us, that we hold as the truth of who we are as Americans. But today, things have exploded in the last week. We head into a delayed primary, delayed by a pandemic, at a moment of converging urgencies. Even as we struggle with the next steps in dealing with that ongoing pandemic, we're also struggling with ongoing racial violence and the literal burning of our cities. We are seeing rage, and we're seeing opportunistic rioters co-opt that rage to instigate violence and widen our divides. And we're seeing state violence as well, deployed indiscriminately against peaceful protesters and journalists. We see politicians denying that racism exists, and a president threatening the citizens of the country he ostensibly leads, and all sorts of people responding to rage and calls of hurt with some version of, yeah, but, then offering some kind of BS reason why victims are responsible for their own abuse. All of that is a way to silence righteous protest and discount the demand for change that have long been promoted and never delivered. Yesterday, I participated in a community march for Black Lives Matter here in Meadville. First of all, I want to commend the remarkable swiftness and skill of the young woman who put that event together in very short order. She rallied a sizable crowd, 150 to 200 people, and she helped that march maintain a focus on its aim of peaceful protest together. Afterward, there was actually this great moment where a few remaining folks had a warm and serious discussion with the chief of the Meadville Police and his assistant chief, and both of those officers themselves offered respect and understanding. They all stood together in a moment of silence. That's the story we need to be telling. That is a civic action, both the march and the moment afterward, that is steeped in hope and good faith. Yet this is the story that the bullies keep trying to hide. Mutual understanding and respect wreck the bullies' goals, so they try to drown it out. They try to make us think it's not possible. We vote tomorrow to resist the ugly world the bullies desire. That's what we're doing. The bullies drive by peaceful protests, coal rolling in 2 diesel pickups, black exhaust and roaring engines intended to drown out the collective voice of hope and justice. That was yesterday. Or bullies show up at the Diamond and shout willful ignorance during the march's 2 minutes of silence intended to honor the gasping end of George Floyd's life. They are later quoted in the newspaper about having people on speed dial for when the protest turns into a riot. Because that's all the bullies see when people stand up for justice. All they can see is violence when the hurt speak about their pain. Of course there was no riot. The march came to resist violence, not offer it. The bullies show up online these days a lot, and they troll discussions about public health, mock people for wearing masks, call the virus just a flu. The bullies vote again and again in state legislature for meaningless, doomed to fail resolutions that they pretend are about liberty, but instead are about undermining the governor politically, and the governor is acting to keep the Commonwealth safe. They ignore opportunities to legislate for ways that actually would have helped people stay safe and stay at home, because bullies only know harm. Bullies hurl insults and hurtful memes. Bullies threaten violence. Bullies send your friendly neighborhood PA House Rep candidate hateful, ignorant emails. So the message is getting out. But we must tell the story of our marches where people come together, when police officers can engage with protesters peacefully and respectfully, where there are only actually 2 bullies at the Diamond and only one spoke. And we have to recognize that there were 200 people lying on the grass in the memory of George Floyd. There were many more cars honking their horns in solidarity than there were yahoos smoking the air. The bullies, as always, are vastly outnumbered, but they are loud. They are always loud. They wait for moments of silence, then break it with their shouts or their revs or with their online threats of violence that in fact preceded that march yesterday, or by always changing the subject to their own narrow, often imbecilic interests. Yeah, but what about? Or by ignoring the reality in front of their own noses and instead leaning into their own distorted fever dreams of government conspiracy. This is how bullies win, or how they stay in positions of power, by convincing us through their loudness and bluster that they're bigger than us, that they outnumber us, that it's useless to try, that they'll beat us up, that we're the stupid ones. It is every junior high locker room everywhere. Tomorrow, we're taking one of the many steps we can to demonstrate that that all just isn't true. That's the power we have at the ballot box. that we do have the chance to speak in force. But, another but, around here, the bullying shouts affect the ballot box. You can't imagine how many people have told me this year a Democrat can't win in Crawford County. And partly because of that, Democrats don't show up. Or in general elections, many reasonable Republicans we call neighbors find it hard to pull the lever for a D because the shouters have convinced them through bullying lies that party matters over person or our mutual benefit. Or that two issues completely irrelevant to state government should control all of their voting. Maybe those reasonable Republicans leave the line blank, or maybe they hold their nose and vote for someone they know is a weak, ineffective, damaging through uselessness politician because the shouts make it hard to hear across the partisan divide. Or because they fear the bullies will turn on them too. That's what they want, the shouters. They want to bully and intimidate the reasonable and just. They do it with violence and with lies and threats of violence and more lies and anti-science and conspiracy theories and racism veiled thinly or not veiled at all with online jeers and rudeness. So we vote tomorrow in a primary that is by design partisan. If you're voting for me tomorrow, well, thank you. And not to take you for granted, that's the easy part. Convincing fellow Democrats to vote for the only Democrat on the ballot. Not super difficult. So, we head tomorrow to the end of the easy part. The primary will be done, and we will face 5 months of campaigning for the November election. The shouts will get louder. The bullies will try even harder to convince everyone that you can't elect a Democrat in Crawford County. I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need you in my corner on the ballots for sure, but also out there in the world. I need you to talk to your reasonable Republican friends and your independent friends and your third-party friends. We need our neighbors to hear that us includes them also. And we also need to keep spreading the enthusiasm with our Democratic friends, those who have felt shouted down and bullied for so long. Those coal-rolling yahoos are going to be out there, drowning us out, making it seem like we're the few and that we should be ignored. They'll gun their engines and interrupt our reasonable discussions with shout-downs and aggression. I mean this figuratively and unfortunately, literally. Let's rise to that challenge. Let's take tomorrow as our first act of restoring the grace and hope that Pennsylvania and America deserves. Let's refuse to be quiet about what we need, what we all need, about who we are and what that can mean for our region. The bullies have been winning too much lately, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing out there. It's our turn. It's our time. When we raise our voices and when we march together, and when we vote together, and when we refuse to be silenced by the bullies that want us to just stop talking, when we demand that our politics reflect equity and social responsibility and the greater good and deep neighborliness, that's a hard word this morning, then we can have the commonwealth that we deserve. Join me tomorrow at the ballot box, or mailing it in. You still have until 8 p.m. tomorrow if you still have that mail-in ballot sitting at home. All of that voting is step one toward restoring the act of hope and faith in our Commonwealth. Thanks for being along so far. I'm looking forward to the next part with you. Have a good week.